participates in a worldwide beauty business valued at $265 billion, growing at an annual rate of 3.4%. All of this is supposed to get your attention. The beauty business is big business, and the strategists within the industry have enormous economic incentive to understand our customers in order to surprise and delight them. The beauty business may seem like a simple proposition. Maybe you think we encounter the same challenges as other global consumer product companies, and we do. But we also sell products that serve a basic biological need, deep-rooted. A closer inspection of this reveals some aspects that are not common in other businesses and call out for an explanation. We use neuromarketing to do that. But before we get to the brain images, we need to cover a little biology to understand what we're doing. Because after all, neuromarketing is a biological science. So imagine the last time you passed the Estée Lauder cosmetic counter at Macy's in Manhattan. What do you remember? The customers are almost all women. Why is such a large business ignored by almost the entire male population? This is consistent in Paris, Abu Dhabi, New Delhi, Beijing, Tokyo, Jakarta, Auckland, and Honolulu. Why are these offerings so popular among women in every country and every region of the world? The predominant products are for the face and fragrance. Of the prestige makeup offered by Estée Lauder counter, 25% are for the eye, 24% are for the lips, and 46% are the cover face tones. There are no products to highlight the ears, and there are no products to highlight the nose. Why not for these body parts? There are two competing explanations that are offered. The first is the social media theory. One common explanation is that social and fashion media drive this industry, and that women would not ordinarily purchase makeup and cosmetics except for social pressure. The theory goes that women are taught from birth by social media, the women's magazines, icons of glamour, and even their own mothers that buying cosmetics is a woman's duty and a requirement for a happy life. We have, in fact, within our own social memory, a test of this hypothesis. The case study is the country of Bulgaria. It wasn't so long ago, in fact 1990, that Bulgaria went from a closed communist nation to an open democratic country. Bulgaria became a communist country after World War II in 1945. The autocratic regime imposed a centrally planned economy. Government planners, who were almost all men, made decisions concerning the availability of consumer goods, including cosmetics. The choice of beauty products for most categories was limited to two, made by the two main cosmetic companies. They were of terrible quality. Black and gray markets and smuggled or diverted goods were heavily penalized. From 1945 to 1990, the communists controlled the media and told people that their basic needs were provided for. They were told that a woman's concern with personal beauty and fashion was a remnant of her bourgeois consciousness, and that this must be expunged. This vanity of cosmetics message pervaded government publicity, and especially the social media controlled by the government. At the same time, women were encouraged by the same social media to join the workforce and study traditionally male trades. By 1989, it was the only politically correct message that most women had heard in their lifetimes. Then in 1990, the Bulgarian communist government collapsed, along with the rest of communism. Immediately, the demand for cosmetics and perfumes exploded, significantly exceeding the growth of income of the people. Between 1997 and 2002, the growth in sales of cosmetics exceeded those for household appliances, radios, TV, and clothing. The number of perfumeries alone increased 65%. If the social media theory was correct, it's hard to explain why 45 years of Bulgarian social media could not dissuade the use of cosmetics among a generation of Bulgarian women. A similar pattern followed in China. Following the liberalization of social laws in the 1990s, China experienced an explosion of plastic surgery, despite the absence of any widespread media campaign. What the history of Bulgaria and China teach us is that social media can follow and shape but cannot create fundamental human social drives. Despite a generation of dominant media messaging that cosmetics were undesirable, Bulgarian and Chinese women immediately turned to the pursuit of beauty. The social media theory cannot explain this behavior. The other explanation for the drive for beauty is rooted in evolutionary biology. This theory says that cosmetics are evolutionarily adaptive for women. That is, they contribute to solving a biological problem for a woman that improves her relative reproductive success potential. The theory says beauty is therefore hardwired in her genes. The beauty drive also arose very early in evolution and spread with women as the humans conquered the globe, which explains why it's universal. What does reproductive success potential mean? Humans as a species have developed a survival and reproduction strategy. Our intelligence and our omnivorous eating habits have allowed us to survive and multiply in nearly every ecology of the world. From about 10,000 people at our low point in human history, we are now more than 7 billion worldwide. That's what I call success. The question is whose genes expanded and whose genes were lost in that enormous increase in population. Each sex, male and female, has a strategy for reproductive success, meaning producing the proportionately most number of children and grandchildren in the succeeding generations. That same strategy includes advertising to potential mates and competing members of the opposite sex that you are valuable. We call the display of these traits attractiveness or sex appeal. It's quite remarkable that people of all cultures agree on what is attractive. A meta-analysis was recently published of 919 studies covering over 15,000 observers. They report that people agree within cultures and across cultures about who is attractive and who is not. They found that men and women agree, and that people of all ages agree on who is attractive. This strongly suggests that judgments of physical attractiveness are hardwired in human genes. It's simply not possible that these preferences are taught to people. A study at the University of Texas looked at 93 6-month-olds. They found that they gazed longer at faces that adults judged as attractive and spent less time looking at faces that were judged as not attractive. This is a finding that cannot be explained by the social media theory. So here's how we can explain these observations. People have a reproductive success potential, and it differs from person to person, as almost any characteristic would in a population. This is a natural variation within the population. People naturally display their reproductive success potential in the shape of their body and their appearance. We call this attractiveness. It's the human brand. Now, during the human history, we've evolved brain preferences and brain functions to detect and value those attractive features because they're signals of fitness. Those who can detect attractiveness for partnering will be at an evolutionary advantage in leaving her genes to a greater extent in the next generation. So we have a situation in which we have a signal of fitness, and the brain co-evolves to identify that signal because it's evolutionary a successful strategy. Remember, our brains can sometimes prefer the signal of fitness and not the actual fitness. An example of this may be the hair on the top of our heads. Ancient people associated this hair with attraction because it was a signal of fitness, and those people with more hair had advantages in life. After many generations, they selected people who had more hair on the top of their heads. Now, even though hair on the top of our heads may provide absolutely no biological advantage, it's a signal of reproductive fitness, and brands that cater to the hair on top of our heads do very well. Estée Lauder has two, Aveda and Bumble & Bumble, and they do very well. Thank you very much. So what drives sex appeal? What are the features that make a person attractive? The sex hormones, testosterone in men and estrogen in women, largely drive the body and facial features people look for. The onset of puberty ramps up hormone levels and reshapes the male and female bodies. Men increase their shoulder to waist ratio, their beards grow, and their jawlines become more pronounced. For women, breasts develop, the hip to waist ratio increases, and their jawlines and facial features become softer. To make my point today, I'm going to be showing you some composite images, which are now a common and powerful technique. Scientists use facial recognition software to align several facial images and then create a composite. The composite looks like a person, but it's not really anyone who actually lived. In the same way, the images can be morphed to emphasize certain facial features. A word of caution about composite images. They tend to be artificially attractive, since the brain prefers average faces. It has to do with processing fluency that we heard about, but that's another story. Also, imperfections in any one person are averaged out and erased in the composite. But there's still many lessons to be learned by studying them. Here we have an example of an image constructed by combining 10 men. On the left is the composite made from 10 images judged the most masculine. And on the right is the image of the composite of the 10 most feminine-looking men in the group. Most people can see the difference right away, although it may be difficult for you to say exactly what it is you're attending to. Women are so attuned to facial features of men that simply by looking at photographs, they can correctly rank order men based on testosterone levels in their saliva. Interestingly, while a woman tends to prefer a man with high testosterone for an affair, she prefers a little less testosterone for her long-term mate, and her parents prefer even a little less testosterone. In fact, exaggerating the testosterone characteristics, the masculinity of men's faces, actually makes them less attractive. But people cannot get enough of estrogen. In a series of studies by David Parrott, panels of men and women were shown women's faces that were morphed to exaggerate feminized features. 95% of men and women decided that feminization of women's faces made them more attractive. The same result was found in faces of Europeans, Africans, and Asians. In the study illustrated here, the scientists measured estrogen in women over the course of their monthly cycles. Both men and women rated their attractiveness. Women with higher estrogen levels had higher ratings of femininity, attractiveness, and health. Here I show the composites of the 10 women with the highest estrogen levels on the left and the lowest estrogen levels on the right. Again, most people can tell there's a difference and prefer the face on the left, but they have trouble stating exactly what it is that they're looking at. Interestingly, when women put on makeup, the correlation between estrogen and attractiveness disappears. This shows that makeup literally makes up for lower levels of estrogen. This is the answer to the first question. Why are cosmetics only for women? Cosmetics accentuate estrogen-driven female characteristics, as you can see here. Notice that the makeup is applied mainly to the eyes, the lips, and to accentuate the cheekbones, which minimizes the jawline. Because the judgments of attractiveness are universal and based on estrogen levels, cosmetics are used universally to highlight estrogenic facial features. Estrogen-driven attractiveness can have real economic consequences. One of my favorite reports was a study of tipping behavior in a French restaurant. Male patrons gave tips more often to waitresses who wore makeup. And when they did tip, they gave them larger amounts of money than to waitresses without makeup. There was no difference for female patrons, even though both the male and the female patrons thought that the waitresses with makeup were more attractive. Another study showed that in a crowded bar, men more quickly approached women who wore red makeup than women who wore other shades of lipstick. Men approached women who wore red lipstick rather than any other shade or no lipstick at all. So cosmetics serve to accentuate the effects of estrogen on a woman's face, which is why men don't use cosmetics. I consider these body and facial features driven by estrogen to be marks of the human brand for women in the same way that the shape and logo of a bottle of Coca-Cola define its brand. The purpose of Estée Lauder products, as you can imagine, is to perfect the human brand, and each of these women, as Mrs. Lauder said, every woman can be beautiful. So what are the details of the human brand and how does our brain recognize them? First, the brain recognizes bilateral symmetry and body proportion. The most elemental value in the human brand is bilateral symmetry, meaning the left and the right side of the body are mirror images of each other. Bilateral symmetry is a sign of the absence of congenital or developmental defects, malnutrition, or parasitic infections, which were all common maladies in subsistence living in our distant past, and unfortunately in our current environment. People with poor health as children tend to look unusual or away from the norm by the time they're 17 years old. Although minor variations are often of no functional consequence, they do have dramatic impact on the perception of beauty and ultimately reproductive fitness. Such judgments of the human brand are culturally universal. As I mentioned, men and women differ in body shape under the influence of the sex hormones. The perfect ratio of waist to hips for men is about 0.9. For women who have wider hips, the preferred ratio of waist to hips is 0.7. Once again, this ratio for women is universal among all cultures that have been studied, suggesting that this preference is genetically hardwired in our brains. This idea is supported by one of the more interesting studies that have been conducted with fMRI. This was a study of women who underwent plastic surgery on their bodies. Men were shown pictures of the women naked before surgery, and not surprisingly, distinct parts of their brain were activated. They were then shown the pictures of the same women after cosmetic surgery had improved their waist-to-hip ratio to be closer to 0.7. By comparing the brain reactions in the before and after pictures, the study reported that approaching the ideal ratio specifically activated the orbitofrontal cortex and the anterior cingulate cortex. These two brain regions have been associated with judging values between alternatives. We pay special attention to our people's faces. We have a unique and well-developed area of the brain devoted just to facial recognition called the fusiform face area. As social creatures, it is essential that we read other people's intentions and emotions in their faces and adjust our behavior accordingly. We use the face to determine attractiveness of the human brand. In another fMRI study, men were shown faces of beautiful women while their brains were scanned. Compared to average faces, the attractive faces specifically activated the nucleus accumbens in the caudate region of the brain. This is a region that is a reward center of the brain, as we've heard. So, in fact, we are built to reward ourselves with a little dose of dopamine when we make the right evolutionary choice. The eyes are a feature of the face closely related to beauty. The brain uses a special region, the superior temporal sulcus, for the job of following eye movements in others and determining the direction of their view. This region develops early, and neonates learn to follow within months their mother's gaze. Eye recognition is wired directly to the most fundamental emotional processing unit of the brain, the amygdala. So in summary, the brain is built to monitor the symmetry and shape of the body and features of the face, especially the eyes. In this way, the brain is attuned to the human brand. There's one more driver of the human brand for your brain, and that is youth. It's common to think that this is a recent trend. In fact, it is not. People are exquisitely sensitive to the age of others and are excellent judges of each other's age. Here we have an example of composite pictures of 22-year-old women and 70-year-old women. And I apologize for the picture on the left. I contacted the author to get a higher resolution, but it wasn't available. So this is unfortunately scanned from a book. In both cases, the image on the left is a composite of those who look young for their age, and on the right is a composite of those who looked old for their chronological age. For most of us, it is obvious that the composite on the right appears older, but many of us struggle to say why. Our brain uses various facial cues, even if we cannot call it into consciousness and express it. The reason youth is important is rooted in evolutionary biology. For women, youth is a strong predictor of estrogen levels in all human culture studied. The appeal of youth is not just a trendy preference, but is likely selected in our ancestors thousands of years ago. Cosmetics are used to counter the loss of estrogen effects with aging. The prevalence of makeup use among Western women rises from 74% in the 18 to 24-year-old age group, where estrogen is its highest, to 81% in the 35 to 44-year-old age group, where it's already begun to decline. These evolutionary pressures to accurately judge age have focused our attention on estrogen-driven traits that most readily reveal a woman's age. In a comprehensive study of individual human facial features, The analysis concluded that the most important factors in judging age are the size of the eyes, the size of the lips, and the evenness of skin tone. And in these images, you see exactly where makeup is applied, predominantly to the eyes, to the lips, and to even tone. At Estée Lauder, we've conducted image analysis on pictures of thousands of women in every major cultural group. In every country we studied, the size of a woman's eyes decrease with age. This is from top to bottom. They get smaller top to bottom in every culture. The same thing is true of lips. They get thinner from top to bottom in every culture we've studied. Eye makeup, which is used to increase the appearance of the size of the eyes, has the greatest effect on attractiveness as judged by both men and women. Observers look at the eyes of women with eye makeup 40% longer than women without it. And if the rest of the face is made up, the attention to the eyes increases 80%. Lipstick, which increases the appearance of the size and accentuates the shape of the lip, increases the time people spend looking at lips by 26%. Now consider evenness of skin tone. When images of just a swatch of skin from British girls and women were shown to observers, they were able to accurately estimate biological age. Their evaluations showed a strong correlation between judging someone as older and unevenness of hemoglobin, the red component of skin, and melanin, the pigmented component of skin, in the distribution within the sample. Homogeneity of this appearance was also correlated with increased attractiveness and appearance of healthiness. For people shown pictures of both made-up and no made-up faces, the number of eye fixations and dwell time were positively correlated with skin color homogeneity. We focus on the homogeneity of skin color because it's a marker of age. Our studies have shown that all people in all cultures get darker with age, and their skin tone becomes uneven. The particular color change that occurs differs among ethnicities. For example, young African women have a strong yellow tone that declines with age, while in China, young Chinese women have lower yellow tones, which increase with age. Therefore, a yellow skin tone means health, beauty, and youth in Africa, and aging and unattractiveness in China. More importantly, as people get darker with age, the color contrast between the hair, the eyes, and facial skin is reduced. Once again, cosmetics are used to counter this sign of aging by enhancing color contrast, which explains in part why some men dye their hair to increase the color contrast between the top of their head and the rest of the face. I spend a lot of money to have my hair dyed gray. Now we can address this troubling observation that I made at the beginning. Why is there no makeup for the nose, and why is there no makeup for the ears? The simple reason is that the length of both the ears and the nose continue to increase with age. These are the last features a woman would want to highlight because increased attention would indicate an older age. Ergo, no nose and no ear cosmetics. So how do people feel when they use cosmetics? We have a $10 billion business, so you have to say that people are pretty satisfied. But it turns out not to be that simple. While people are very good at judging others, they have a great deal of trouble making self-assessments. Correlation between self-ratings and objective measurements of individual attractiveness are remarkably low. People agree about 75% of the time about who else is attractive, but only about 25% of the time do they agree with others about whether they themselves are attractive. Let me give you an example. In the study shown here, images of volunteers were morphed to make them progressively more attractive or less attractive using the principles that I've just described. The subjects were then invited to pick out from an array of pictures the one that was the most accurate representation of themselves. And remember, people look in the mirror almost every day. People tended to pick out a picture that was better looking than their actual picture. And in fact, the most frequent choice was about 20% better looking than they really were. We seem to have a very high self-regard, as if we lived in Garrison Keillor's mythical Lake Wobegon, where women are strong, the men are good-looking, and all the children are above average. We did our own studies at Estée Lauder that confirmed this. We conducted with SANS research an EEG study using morphed pictures of the subjects to determine how much improvement were women looking for as determined by activation of brain centers detected by EEG. we found that on average, people were much more attuned to their own images than those of others. As you can see in the left, activation when viewing themselves, and right, activation when viewing others. This was true of Caucasian women, but it was also true of black women and Hispanic women, who I show here. Compare the attention values on the left graph for self versus the right graph for viewing others. In considering their own images, they began with a low or negative emotion about their own natural appearance. We had to morph their images to a 20% improvement before we saw asymmetrical activation in the brain scans that SAMS interprets as positive emotions. So the answer to the question is, do cosmetics really make people happy, is a difficult one. People carry around in their heads an enhanced self-image and pay most attention to their own looks and are critical of the way they look themselves. Showing a woman that cosmetics make her look better is much harder than showing her how cosmetics make someone else look better. That's much easier. Now we come to the conclusion of this review of the human brand. Here are some simple takeaway points about neuromarketing in the cosmetic industry. Neuromarketing is the convergence of evolutionary biology, neuroscience, psychology, genetics, economics, and marketing. It's coming to rock our world. There's no turning back. This means that marketing is becoming a biological science. The brain comes from somewhere, and you have to understand human evolution and genetics to understand the brain. You can't do cutting-edge marketing, and I'll add here cutting-edge neuromarketing anymore without understanding biology. You need to understand your customers, their genes, and their brain before you start showing them advertisements to pull their levers. My world is luxury beauty, and we believe it's hardwired in our genes, and the genes then can direct the construction of our brains. It is global because all humans share a common descent. Social media does not create beauty preferences, but media follows the drives of evolutionary biology. A great example of this is the lipstick effect. Now, classical economics would consider luxury cosmetics to be elastic goods whose demand would contract in difficult economic times of a recession, just like the demand for luxury homes and boats. But Leonard Lauder, the merchant prince of luxury cosmetics, first formulated the concept called the lipstick effect. He observed that sales of lipsticks increased during economic downturns as women choose small pleasures to compensate for losses and increase their appearance advantage in more competitive environments. A thorough academic study recently of recessions over the last 50 years confirmed this theory. Women tend to increase their purchase of products that enhance their appearance while decreasing their purchase of non-appearance enhancing products during economic downturns. Remember, trends cannot overcome biological disposition. Bucking biology can get you noticed for a short period of time, but it's not a sustainable business model. During tough times, remember the hardwired universals because they will always come back. Align yourself with evolutionary biology. Neuromarketing insights can create new categories of goods and services. Let me give you an example from my own experience at Estée Lauder. Products that lighten the skin tone used to be almost exclusively a Japanese or Asian-specific beauty play. And we told ourselves that porcelain-like white skin was a cultural icon peculiar to Japan and Asia. The Estée Lauder company Clinique played in this market with a franchise in Japan called Dermawhite. When we developed new skin lightening technology in 2008, we took a close look at this category. We understood at that time that uneven skin tone is a sign of aging in every culture. So we took this Japanese product, called it Clinique Even Better Clinical Spot Corrector, and repositioned it as an anti-aging product and marketed it throughout the world. Even Better Clinical today is more than 5 times larger than Dermawhite ever was. At the height of its launch in 2009, 50% of all first-time visits to Macy's in North America was to purchase this product. This product created a whole new category of skincare, anti-aging skin even tone, without cannibalizing existing Estée Lauder products. I'm sure that there are many more opportunities to apply the principles of neuromarketing to other luxury businesses. Many of them are similar to cosmetics because they are aspirational. Economists call them positional goods, in that they appeal to the hardwired desire for status. For example, Have we taken a good look at goods and services that appeal to one sex or the other and asked, what would it take for women to watch sporting events? What would have to happen for men to go to chick flicks? Here are other examples. Do we really understand why developing countries prefer Cadillac and Pontiac, while developed countries prefer Aston Martin, Spiders, and Teslas? What could luxury hotel services learn from evolutionary biology and neuroscience? There are many more opportunities in neuromarketing to create new categories of businesses beyond just fine-tuning advertisements. I hope these few minutes have sparked ideas for you. Thank you very much. Well, this is, you're asking someone from Estée Lauder, so they certainly shouldn't go to the grocery store. I'm not familiar with where Estée Lauder is, but I'm sure it's Sophia. I'm sure there's an Estée Lauder counter there.
It's
so it's not just using makeup, but it's competition among women. So there's always an interest in presenting yourself in the best possible light when you go out. So just as an example, most of you, maybe if you come back from a party, and if you ask the man, what were the women wearing at the party? He'll say, I don't remember. But if you ask the woman, what were they wearing? Each woman can say what the other women were wearing. So this is just an example that women use their appearance and their brand in social settings to compete. It's just the nature of evolutionary biology. So that's the reason why Bulgarian women don't go out without makeup.
Side of the business and ran Neuro labs. So I've seen a lot of POS tested and imagery and how women react to beautiful women. And I always had a curiosity on how makeup handles that, because you go for the very perfect female in a lot of the imagery. But I've seen very low emotional connection scores in perfect women situations. How do you handle that on the connection to the average woman?
Well, so I can only speak about our end of the business, which is the luxury end of the business. And we have a very large aspirational component to our customers. So they come to the Estée Lauder counter already with an aspiration. They want to be something else. They're not coming to a CVS drugstore to get Maybelline so that they can put on eyeliner and go out. They're coming to a luxury goods store not only because of what the goods do, but what the goods say about themselves. So unless you tested your consumers in an aspirational luxury good environment, you're going to get some answers which don't apply to our customers. So having said that, a big part of our training of our beauty advisors is, just as I said, every woman can be beautiful. So our message to women is, this is the ideal, this is the aspirational part, but you too can join this. One way to do it is to buy our products. But if you do that, we'll show you how to use it, you'll get it right the first time. We're not going to promise you're going to be a supermodel, but you can join her club. So I think there's a difference between being a makeup company and being a luxury makeup company. It's not just the higher end of price spectrum. There's something different about it.
Well, we're actually out of time, so I'm going to have to skip that. I'm sorry.